Hey, folks, and welcome back to the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we're talking about where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how to stop those leaks, and how to bring women back if they've left water. I'm really excited about our next guest, Susan Donnelly, who is a professional engineer, works with one of the large consulting firms at HDR, as a leader in her space, and was also part of a meeting that I was at to look into some of the issues facing women and achieving gender parity in water. And so she's got a lot of years in the industry, so I'm sure she's got a lot of great things to say. So Susan, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, take us back, begin at the beginning. How did you get involved in water? How did you get involved in engineering? What was that experience like? How since, and then we'll just have a conversation.
Sure, I can give you a little background of how I ended up where I am. I've been in the engineering industry now for almost 25 years, about 23 years, and as you mentioned, I've been focused on buried infrastructure. I've worked for consult. I've always been on the private side, so I've always worked as a consultant in the industry. I haven't yet made my way into the public sector. I started out like not in engineering. I started out in the sciences. And then I quickly recognized that women, while there was a higher prevalence of women on the science side of STEM, you actually were able to make more of a difference if you were on more of the engineering side of things. So I kind of shifted my career a little bit. I started out as a chemist and then shifted into civil engineering. I made my way into water because I ended up, as odd as it sounds, being fascinated by buried infrastructure. And the idea of being able to, as my part of my career, making sure that people have water. Water is everything. Without water, we can't live. So that is where I've been the last 23 years.
Nice. And that's the area that there's been a lot of new developments in the buried infrastructure space, ways of not having to dig everything up, to have the little cameras that go through the pipes and take all the 3D images and all this other jazz. And so it's an exciting place to be.
It really is. The technology is really advancing, and being able to be a part of that is really exciting. You can really
Yeah.
make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, you're an interesting point about coming through science, from science to engineering. And I actually, somewhat similarly, although I actually initially have been a government major at Dartmouth. And, my parents said, why we doing engineering? Because they figured, you just flunk out and we're spending all this money. And so I actually spent several years in legislative offices and campaigns and agencies and whatnot. And then had an opportunity to work at an environmental consulting firm. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. We're not just talking about problems or regulating problems, but actually getting in there and fixing things, right? And started going back to school at night and work my way up to where I could basically do all the groundwater studies, and had been taking a lot of geology classes, but couldn't sign off on my own reports because I didn't have the certification. So went back to school for a year to do geology first and NC State, and then a graduate degree, and really understood, as you said, that often the leadership roles, the decision makers, are the engineers. And we'd had some conversations throughout the summit with folks about, being open to other heads of utilities that, business skills and public administration skills and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, that the head of a utility will be a city engineer, the head of a division of water resources will be the state engineer. So have you been able to use your engineering to have influence on policy?
On policy per se, not necessarily. I used to work for a technology company that was influential on the policy side of things. However, I have really been focused my career on the nuts and bolts of things, and really being able to, what I do is I help utilities to start programs for condition assessment of their buried infrastructure. So I'm a very process driven person. So setting a process and then being able to develop a tactical plan of how to execute that. So really for me, it's more about getting things done than it is in the policy side of things. I haven't gone to that side of the business in my career yet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and the getting things done part is obviously very important. That's a huge part of what engineers are all about. And even when we're setting up this summit, it's like everything I do, having gone back to school for engineering and done undergraduate, master's and PhD in civil engineering. Everything's got to be captured. Like, how do we do this? How do we set up the memes? How do we set up the speaker pages? Everything's got to have a process so that we can replicate it, right? Mm-hmm. So it isn't just lost into the ether. Well, we did this once this way, and then later we have to try to remember what we did again. Processes are what really help us to scale, right?
Yep, absolutely. That's the key, right? Like everything. For a process to be successful, it has to be able to be repeatable. It has to be a proven successful process. Of course, things will happen, and nothing's ever going to be perfect the first time. But you're able to, when you have a process, you're able to go back and identify what works, what doesn't work, be flexible, make adaptations, so that you're able to end up with ultimately the most successful process moving forward, and have a model that can then be replicated throughout the industry.
And I'm hoping that's what my speakers will say about the summit too. We're being flexible. We're going to have an impact. Starting a little later than we like, but so your experiences as a woman in the industry. I mean, as an undergraduate, as you started your career, what are some things that have come up for you?
So I'll say that starting out, I went to the University of Maryland, which is a large state school right outside of Washington, D.C. You're the turtle. That's right. We're going to be in the NCAA tournament here coming up on both the men's and the women's in the coming week here. But I started out, and the University of Maryland is a multicultural school. However, for me, making the transition from the sciences, where I was studying chemistry, I had a lot of women who I was in classes with, and then going into the engineering world, it was quite different. And I didn't recognize it at first until I sat there and I looked around and I saw. And then the very first time, I literally had someone shut a door in my face. As we're walking in the classroom, someone pulled the door behind me, literally smacked right into the door. And it really opened my eyes in more ways than one. And then when I got into the industry, again, I was, a bit naive, I think, and thinking that everybody was out there for the best interest of each other. And then I quickly realized that once the lure of being the only woman in the room, which is often what the case is, as you know, like you're often the only woman in the room. Once that luster sorts of wear off, and the men realize that you are in fact challenging to them, and they see you as somewhat of a threat to their career. They're no longer wanting to work with you for the best interest of your organization or for the client. They're out for their own personal growth. And it was at that point that I really started to look around and question whether the engineering field was something that was going to allow me to have a sustainable career, in all honesty. And I think I was probably 12 or 15 years into my career at that point. And I started considering whether I was going to leave the engineering field. And that's when I first started reading about it. And looking at the statistics and I think the National Science Foundation, NSF, had a great article, one of the first ones that I saw, and it was aptly titled, "Stemming the Tide, why are women leaving engineering in such droves?" I think it was 2012 or something like that. And I started to recognize that there were people like me, and it wasn't just me, because we often, because we are the only only woman, or very few other women, we don't see people in leadership positions who look like us. We often get very isolated, and we don't recognize that it's not us. It all comes back to just us, because we don't have anybody to talk to about it. Right. So that was when I started looking outwardly and looking for other women who I could look up to, people who I could create a network for. And I think that was the very first time I started really being open with other women about it, because in some aspects, it was still the mentality of, you just need to like be one of the guys. And I'm not a man. I don't want to be one of the guys,
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. Yeah, tuck your hair under your baseball hat and go be one of the guys. That was like the highest compliment. Oh yeah, she's one of the guys.
Yep. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to be one of the guys. I wanted to be seen as an equal, and I wanted to be treated as an equal for who I am, even though I had very unique aspects that they didn't have. And I started to recognize what I could offer. And I started demanding more from the industry itself. Right. And I started connecting more with women who were I tried to connect more with women who were more experienced, more tenured in their careers, but I quickly realized there weren't a lot of them. And then the ones that I was able to connect with were very few and far between. And either they were very outspoken and they were deemed to be difficult to work with, or they were the ones who had resigned themselves to just being one of the guys. And that they didn't like the stigma of standing out, so they would just go with the flow. I have seen things start to change recently. There are more women like you who are making things more known and trying to bring a lot of these issues to the surface so that we can actually talk about them and we can acknowledge them, and we can talk about all the great things that women have to offer in the STEM fields, in the engineering fields, so that we can all know that each other exists, know that there are real issues out there, and that there are some drawbacks that we have.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know, and I'll say I'm going to have sort of like an intro to the summit when we get started, and just going to review some of the what's out there. And there was a big longitudinal study that MIT Susan Silby at MIT had put together, where a lot of people cite the 40% of women with engineering degrees are gone within 10 years, or don't even start when they finish, just based on their experiences in classrooms and internships. But that was a really deep study, and she had people keeping diaries and writing about their day-to-day experiences of what they were dealing with, and over time there hasn't been a lot of good stuff on this. You kind of have to pull together, this is about engineers, this is about some that Brookings did on water, or somebody World Bank did globally, or whatever, and it's often they're like snapshot numbers without digging deeper into the why and the what was behind it. There are some things certainly in the AEC, architecture, engineering, contractor space of that there's certain phases where people begin to drop. Around the 7 to 10 mark, might be a point where they're starting families, or it might be a point where they're realizing they don't have, kind of the gene is off the rose, and they're past the honeymoon period, and they're realizing that they might not have a future there. Others kind of in that 12 to 15 year range, where they might be heading into leadership, and are they are they going to be able to get past that middle manager role of, go manage all the young folks, but leave the decision making up to us. And then we also see, maybe a little later stage, those women who have made it to the top, a number of them, especially with elder care issues. So, these are patterns. I mean, we go to a lot of conferences, we talk to a lot of people. I've got my own experience actually being a water professional for 20 years before I started Water Citizen. But has anyone actually done a real study? Not just talked about a study to get, some grant money, but actually, thought through the questions. What are the questions that we need to ask? What are the, we're scientists and engineers. We know how to do this stuff. We know how to design studies. What questions need to be asked? What data can we collect? How are we going to collect that data? Make sure it's representative throughout the industry and different, and not just like with Brookings, just checking the Department of Labor statistics and throwing in a bunch of plumbers. It kind of skews all the data.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent my son, I have a son who's in high school. And our high school has an engineering program. And I started talking with the professor, the teacher who teaches engineering there. I'm like, well, how many girls do you have in your program in high school? This is a 9th to 12th grade high school. And he had exactly 0. He had 0 young ladies involved in that. And so I asked if I could come in and talk to some of the younger folks, younger ladies, either the ones getting ready to come into high school or the ones who are getting ready to graduate, and talk to them. And again, I started the same thing, looking up the statistics. And the interesting thing I found, because we do have a tendency to lump all STEM together, and engineering is different. There are, if you think about, like, for us, like in the engineering field, we don't recognize it, but engineers only make up 1% of our workforce in the United States. And you use the statistic of 40% of the women who go into engineering end up leaving. After you hit 10 years, only 16% of that 1% are women.
How many percent?
16% of the 1%, because 1% of our workforce are engineers, right? And that's a very small group of people that are just engineers. And then 16%, by the time you hit, I think it was 15 or 20 years, are women. That's a very small number of people that you have there, which means we have a very low likelihood of having someone who looks like us in leadership positions. And for me, I can tell you, I have never in the engineering industry, I've been working in the engineering industry for almost a quarter of a century now, never had a woman as a boss, never had a woman as a direct supervisor. And I think that says a lot, because I've been doing this for quite some time, and I've yet to see someone who I report directly to who can provide me with career guidance that looks like me.
As I think about it, I mean, I had a woman on my advisor, on my committee, the only woman in the civil engineering department at CSU when I got my PhD. But I mean, other than legislators, and I worked for a women's state legislature, but as an engineer, no, I never. I also, I remember the first time I was going to work with someone who was younger than me, someone who was actually a planner, and I transferred to this office, and I was really looking for her for 2 reasons. One, because it was, they actually had a women affiliate group up there, and there have been some problems at the other office with, the CMO who is married to the CFO, and she was overseeing all of the, or the marketing director or whatever, and she was overseeing all the admin staff, and was told, and did not interview me, but was told when I got there that she was responsible for supporting my business development efforts, and I had nothing to do with it. I told everybody I thought I was better than everybody, and that they shouldn't work on my projects. I had to do all my own admin, and so to get up there, it's like, this is really cool. I've got that. And then there was a guy who actually had a background like mine. In fact, I knew his advisor. I was someone I had cited his work in my PhD and my lit review of doing multi-criterion decision analysis and spatial decision support systems and all the stuff I was doing. And my very first day in the office, and I knew his credentials because when I was doing business development, I was, they had, that office had more experience with water resources. We were doing more mining and landfills and stuff, water for those areas. And so I knew what his credentials were, and I was looking forward to working with him. My very first day in the office, comes into my little closet side office, and with no window that I was settling into, and stands over me and says, "I objected to your coming in at level 4, which is what I already had been for 2 years. And you just got your PhD. And when I got my PhD at 20 something with no work experience, I was a level 2 and you should have been my level 2." And he wanted a little, somebody to do all the scut work for him. Right. And that's very common. You had these guys who hire very junior people there's a lot of scut work and engineering and science and, data and checking all the data and collecting the data and inputting the data and, printing out the reports and writing the reports and all this kind of stuff. And people like having somebody to just do the work for them. Right.
Yeah,
they do the fun stuff. Right?
And women are often seen as the ones who will do that. Right.
And that's how we ended up with, what was at that office was, all the men, it was in a boom period, and we're in a boom period now with the, infrastructure money and all, is that all the men had either been promoted up or hired away by the clients, which I guess less likely to happen in water utilities stealing from the consultants than in the big oil companies. This was in the Canadian oil sands. But yeah, and so what's left is, women who want to save the world, do good things for the environment. And I think it's a difference too, when we talk about engineering, because we've been talking about these return to work programs, returnships, reentry programs, and sometimes they'll say, "Oh, we have all these engineering positions," but there's a real difference between like computer engineering or manufacturing engineering, right? Engineering for, for-profit companies. Civil and environmental, it's a whole different animal. Because even if you're not doing policy, you're affected by policy. Your work is driven by regulatory constraints, and those change all the time. That's one of the reasons you have to stay up to speed on stuff. And it's, and very, and it's just, even if it's a private firm, private consulting firm or vendor, equipment vendor, tech firm, it's a similar structure of, the different rankings, the different levels that you go up as you go up in the firm, because you have to be able to fit in with the government contracting systems of how much people are paid at different levels and all that kind of stuff. And I think that has an impact on whether women are moving up those different levels or getting to a point where, you may have this much years experience, but this much actual project experience, because you're not getting as much. So you're overqualified and underqualified all at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, how big is your office where you are now? Are you getting involved in working with other women in the office, in the company, and in the associations?
Yeah, sure. So, personally, for what I do is my role, I'm not in an office. I'm 100% remote, which is very nice. I like I said, I have 2 young kids, teenagers, so which allows me flexibility. Our right now, HDR for the first time has a water business group president who is a woman. Extremely talented. I'm really excited about it. It's really going to, I think, change the face of our group. You know, having women see things differently, women do things differently. So I'm really excited to see where she takes us. Personally, from an industry-wide standpoint, I'm quite active in women's networking, that type of thing. I do my best to try to help bring younger women along. I do my best to try to create a network and create an open conversation. So if someone just needs to text and they need to get something off their chest, I think it's really important. Always try to make sure that we have that. And I think that's really one of the most critical parts for us as women in this industry, is making sure that we have a network, a strong support network, because everybody has bad days and we just need someone to tell us, tomorrow's a new day, and just making sure that we're staying in touch with each other and deliberately trying to make an effort to help each other be successful, and not create the competitive environment of, only one woman allowed in the room at a time.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of the business models or educational models that we use for Water Citizen come out of sort of the coaching space, which has become very interested in engineering. And it's like, well, we want to coach women leaders, and where can we find women who can actually afford our coaching fees? Oh, well, look at engineering. They follow directions. They do what they tell them to do. They're getting good salaries, so they pay for it, and they're really frustrated. So they want they've got a pain that we can solve. And then but they don't actually understand what it takes to succeed in our career. And it's not just, being confident or, how you dress or, it's just, are you visualizing the right future and everything? You actually have to get in there, and you have to get the certifications. You have to get the speaking. You have to, the opportunities to present. You have to have the opportunities to lead projects, the opportunities to, there's a way that things get done. And if someone is just a coach in general, especially if they're only coaching other women entrepreneurs, other coaching entrepreneurs, coaching other women coaching entrepreneurs, that doesn't translate to what we do.
I totally agree. One of the best pieces of advice I got very early on is to, you create your own brand. And for us as women, that's very important. And for me, I love being involved in public speaking, making a name, like having my name be known. I go out of my way to participate in both national and regional conferences. I love sharing what I know with other people. And I love teaching people, and I love people asking me questions and learning. So that's one thing I think that we all could benefit as women, is not being afraid to step up and put yourself out there, especially, providing other people with information. Become the expert in the topic and let people know that you're the expert in the topic.
Yeah. And that actually, when I did leave that other firm, became the first woman eligible to become an associate, the engineering division globally, and then discovered why they didn't have any women associates. And so I came back here to DC, hung my shingle, and I had been working. I'd been on a National Academy of Sciences study committee, and I had really helped with permitting of aquifer storage and figuring out, the regulatory barriers around the underground injection control regulations at EPA that treated anything that was put down a well as waste disposal, even though it was treated and tested against the native aquifer, all this other stuff. And I came to this point where, after years of looking for mentors and people could champion me and all this other stuff, realized that I needed to embrace my inner expert, right? And just step into that role and say, I am actually the expert on this. Other people are recognizing me as the expert on it. Now that didn't go
Yeah.
over too well to some people who wanted, the work. I actually had a guy who kept, wanting to have dinner with me at all these groundwater conferences and everything, and finally made a move. And I got up and I walked out, and he contacted all of my clients and all of my speaking engagements and told them not to work with me anymore. And like that entire business was gone.
Wow.
And there's nothing you can do. I mean, there's no, as a solo consultant, you have no real recourse because all of sexual harassment and retaliation and everything else is under labor,
Yeah.
against an employer.
Wow. I am
So,
really sorry. That's difficult. Yeah.
so yeah. And now I get a lot of firms telling me that, oh, they love all my contacts and how much I know about the industry and what's going on. And they want, they're trying to get into the federal space now that there's all these federal dollars but what you need to do is go get a project and win the project and put us on as a sub to you. And then we'll think about hiring.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It is, from a very young age, young girls even are told not to show people how smart they are, not to for lack of a better term, to brag about what and for us, like what that means is that we're always afraid to put ourselves out there. We always want to be 300% sure of what we're saying. That's not necessarily the case when you have men. You have men who are semi-knowledgeable in certain topics, but they have a whole lot of confidence, and they go out there and 90% of it is confidence in standing up and talking to a group of people as the expert in something. And that is something I think we really need to encourage more young women to do, is to feel comfortable standing up and feel comfortable with being the smartest person in the room. It's okay.
Yeah. And it won't make you happy what you are. But and that that ends up being a double-edged sword as well when it comes to trying to apply for jobs when you're older. Because and especially now a lot of the hiring managers are much younger than me, men and women.
Yep.
And so that comes into play. And so I'll be presenting at AWWA on links of racism, sexism, and ageism. And that one of the things that happens is that women, their career paths diverge from their male cohorts, and so they've got more experience. But then you're older, but then the younger generation, you're actually looking for jobs from, that you have the number of years but not the same experience level. I would still want to work with people who had more experience than I did in things like multi-criterion decision analysis and smart water systems, and how I can really up my skills and experience with hands-on experience in those areas. And I don't have a problem working with some younger than me.
Yeah.
Don't know if that goes both ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. The workforce definitely ebbs and flows.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we are shining a light on some of the areas where there's opportunities for improvement, and where we can begin to bring back in women who may have been out of the market for a while, in a way that supports them and provides them with the cohort mentoring, whatever, to ease back in to the workforce when that's not a traditional path. Typically it's straight out of school, or you continue working the whole time, and you might move from one company to the other, one utility, one firm, whatever, to the other, but don't usually step out and then come back in. And so I know that SWE has their science reentry task force. We actually have that interview that we're working on today as well. I'll be recording it today. Not sure where we're going to put it during the week, during the summit. But yeah, that's something we really need to look into as an industry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today and to be with the summit and our audience here. Our for the folks who are watching, go ahead and keep typing in your questions, comments, your experiences. Susan will be able to see everything that you write and respond. We'll have all of her contact information. If there's any resources she'd care to share, we'll have space on the page for that. Susan, any final thoughts for folks who are watching us here today?
I would just say, as a woman, continue to support other women. It's one of the most important things we can do, because until there are more of us in leadership positions, we'll continue to be fighting a little battle.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks again. And keep coming back, watch the rest of the summit, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.